The Binding is an ongoing project, which has had several iterations. It has generated a range of productions in the form of an installation, instruction manual, video and artists' books, and both academic and autobiographic texts. This most recent iteration of the project has been in the making, on and off, over many years. It showcases many of the collaborations that have taken place with musicians, writers, and filmmakers. The Binding Project exhibition opening was on the 13th of April at 54, the Valley Road, and was well attended. These works are different approaches over a number of years, which were inspired by witnessing Dixie's 6-year-old son and the cultural and social forces at play as he emerged into the masculine world of the father. The keynote address was given by Graham Reed, and there was a performance by Sia and Zalizwe Mthembu.
I'm just going to do a few brief thank yous and then hand over to Graham. 2 weeks ago, my son Daniel was here and he helped me unpack the artworks there behind you. He's 21 years old now. He towers over me, and it was a very strange thing to see him carrying his 6-year-old self around. So thank you, Daniel, firstly. And then Bridget. Bridget, thank you for creating this beautiful space. And thank you for your generosity and it's been so amazing connecting with you again. Bridget and I were actually at the Wits School of Fine Art. We did our undergraduate degrees together, so it's been an amazing thing to reconnect with her. So thank you so much, Bridget. Then Joni. Joni, thank you so much for your support and your judicious eye. Then Jane Roberts. Jane, I don't know where you are, can't see you, but Jane Roberts is travelled all the way from Makanda, from Rhodes University. She's in the research department there and has been an amazing support of me over all the years. Then, definitely not least, are all the tech people behind the scenes. So Paul Mills, as usual, behind the camera. And he's recorded a lot of my work over the years, so much appreciation, Paul. Mark Wilby, Mark Sinoff, and then very importantly as well, Francois Lessing. Where's Francois? There he is. Amazing sound, recording, musician person. Thank you so much. He was part of the sound for the video. And then Siyabonga and Zalizwe Mthembu, brilliant musicians, very well known in the jazz arts world in Joburg. It's been so amazing to be able to work with them. Their voices are on the video. And I just feel very, very proud that I could work with them. And then there are other people that I'm going to stop there, except to introduce you to Graham Reed. He's probably very well known to many of you. Academic, writer, activist, reader. Graham holds a PhD in anthropology from the University of Amsterdam. He is currently a research scholar and lecturer at the Yale-Jackson School of Global Affairs. He worked for Human Rights Watch in New York since 2012, but in late 2023, the United Nations Human Rights Council appointed him as United Nations independent expert on protection against violence and discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity. That was quite a lot. That was quite a lot. Yeah. So thank you so much, Graham, for opening this exhibition, and I'm handing over to Graham now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christine. That's an extremely long title, but I talk today in my capacity as Daniel's uncle. My nephew is the protagonist of this exhibition, The Binding. He's also emblematic in this setting of so much else. And I'm going to touch on the so much else through the themes of narrative, masculinities, and witnessing. The Binding evokes the fierce protective love of a mother for her son. Yet at the same time, Christine is a dispassionate witness of forces beyond her control that will shape Daniel's destiny. Overall, it is a poignant and sorrowful reminder of powerful undercurrents poised to leave an indelible stamp on her son's life as a boy child born in a particular place and time. This is a South African story, and it is a story that transcends borders and boundaries. As we heard from Christine, and as you can see and will hear, she's cultivated collaborations across genres, themes, and institutional settings: printmaking, video, bookbinding, photography, fiction, and non-fiction. The institutional settings include the Smithsonian African Art Collection in Washington, D.C., Rhodes University in Makanda, and the Savannah School of Art and Design in Georgia. But collaborations aside, this vision is uniquely Christine's. The copper self-portrait of a heavily pregnant mother-to-be with camera and tripod foreshadows a trajectory of giving birth, of creativity, of producing new life, and of bearing witness. This is Christine's story as a mother as much as it's Daniel's story through the eyes of his mother. So what is my collaborative engagement in this project? A limited edition art book forms part of The Binding and includes a story I wrote. This story emerged in the aftermath of an uncomfortable discussion between my brother and I, unintentionally instigated by Daniel. As brothers, military conscription had cast a shadow over both our lives, albeit in radically different ways. I got off quite lightly, following a path into self-imposed exile that was more available to me as the younger brother. This interaction got me thinking about the shadow of violence and war, the imprint of certain forms of masculinity, call it hegemonic masculinity if you will, and how these forces are bigger and more powerful than ourselves and shape our lives. War also cast a shadow over my parents' lives, and it's a phenomenon that's so evocatively captured in Doris Lessing's series of novels entitled Children of Violence. Researching my story took me to remaining fragments from my family archive and to material traces of my past, my father's high school diary, letters, and so on. I also wrote about my own uncle, Tommy, killed in the Second World War, and whose silent, ethereal presence permeated my childhood. The material object that represented his absence was his banjo, never to be played again, stored away as something almost sacrosanct. And I included in my story my flight from South Africa and the army, born of a messy combination of resistance and an instinct for self-preservation. That's my narrative, and there are several others brought together in this exhibition. One of these is a short story by Bronwyn Law Viljoen, Dixie, which revolves around a hunting party with a sadistic twist. The Shakespearean allusion in The Prince to sleep and to dream reference the ghostly presence of the King of Denmark, imploring his son Hamlet to avenge his murder by killing the new king, Hamlet's uncle. Given my role as uncle, least said about that. While these are some of the explicit narrative threads, the exhibition is permeated by silences, absences, and traces of what cannot be said, drawing on Freud's interpretation of dreams, revisiting the archive of the unconscious. Christine reproduces the dream of the burning child, a father mourning his beloved son. Intimations of burning bring us to proximity with a companion text, the Old Testament biblical narrative of Abraham willing to obey the divine injunction to sacrifice his son Isaac. It's a foundational patriarchal narrative, with Abram being rewarded as progenitor of nations for obedience to a God who, fast forward to the New Testament, goes on to sacrifice his own son. And while happily Isaac had a last-minute reprieve to be replaced by a ram, as we climb the stairs behind me, the shadow of the boy composed of fallen soldiers suggests a different story of sons sacrificed in the name of the Father. It's a very subtle invocation composed of the trivia of the everyday, ubiquitous plastic toy soldiers taking on an ominous quality as precursors of wars to come. Forces of destruction are a shadow presence in the binding, including jarring images of guns in close proximity to the sleeping Daniel. Similarly, Christine's textual and photographic essay hones in on Daniel's paintball birthday party, which took place on the outskirts of Makanda in the Eastern Cape, hosted by a company called Gung Ho. The delight and enthusiasm of the 10-year-old boys is shot through with an unmistakably ominous vision of where these games are leading. And in the South African context, the unmistakable allusion is to compulsory military conscription and the terrible toll that particular form of institutionalized violence took on the lives of so many young men. Yet it's a topic that's shrouded in silence. I can't possibly know what that experience was like, but I've seen some of its effects on friends and others who were conscripted as boys as young as 16 or 17. I'm surprised that there seems to be so little in literature or in the archive on this topic. I recently read a novel, Morphe, about a gay man in the South African Defence Force. And under the Freedom of Information Act, I once sought out the SADF files of one Aubrey Levine, a military psychologist who specialized in aversion therapy to change the sexual orientation of gay recruits. The files were almost all destroyed, as were so many records from that era. A postscript of that is that many years later, in my office in New Haven, Connecticut, I received a call from the Canadian Mounted Police seeking more information on Aubrey Levine, who had settled in Canada and had developed a penchant for fondling young men in his care, for which he was ultimately barred from practicing and convicted. There's a gentleness, a palpable sweetness and vulnerability to the sleeping boy child, wrapped in the delicate fabric of an intricately embroidered blanket made with meticulous care. The detailed, time-consuming work of the domestic sphere is a reminder that both blanket and shroud are situated within the domain of the maternal. These qualities, vulnerability, gentleness, are implicated and amplified in Daniel's role as the source and object of his mother's work. While his mother is situated as protected witness, her gaze identifies something much more ominous, the knowledge that in order to achieve successful masculinity, as defined in a particular place and time, these qualities, vulnerability, gentleness, are a hindrance and not a help. In this body of work, Daniel is uniquely Daniel in a contained world of mother and son, and he's also sort of every boy in this exhibition. These works conjure social forces not of our own making that produce gendered forms. In the binding, these gendered forms traverse both the recent and distant past. The child wrapped in a sheepskin blanket for warmth and comfort evokes the artist's prior work exploring a history of conquest in the Eastern Cape region, in the centrality of sheep farming on conquered territory, a form of historic violence that resonates to this day. Masculinity is a fragile thing, perpetually aspired towards and just as easily lost. As a relational concept, hegemonic masculinity is defined in terms of what it is not feminine, not gay. These concepts exist in symbiotic relation. Again, this is where my story comes in, not only as Daniel's uncle, but Daniel's queer uncle. To grow up queer in a context where normative notions of masculinity are partially predicated on a disavowal of the other, oftentimes means being situated on the outside, looking in. With Christine's focus on gendered forms as mother, as son, and on the roles assigned and enacted in the day-to-day, the exhibition is both time-bound, as Christine mentioned, Daniel is now a young man of 21, and prescient. It feels so timely. When I reread my story recently, I said that I would not write the same today. Not because my story has changed, but because of the intensified focus on questions of gender and sexuality in the world. While this is not new, the intensity and amplification of these issues in the public sphere is. Gender and sexuality are situated at the confluence of concepts of private and public, intimate and social, domestic and political, claims to nature and calls to culture. No wonder this is highly charged terrain, likely to erupt in times of social, economic, and political strain. Once relegated to the margins, to the shadows, to zones of silence and secrecy, contestations around gender and sexuality, far from being incidental or peripheral, are now often symbolically front and center to geopolitical conflicts around the world. In The Binding, Christine returns to the roots of Judeo-Christian patriarchal forms and explores their contemporary manifestations. It's both uniquely personal and remarkably emblematic. In his book, The Sorrow of War, Vietnamese writer and veteran Bao Ninh talks of the redeeming quality of sadness. It was thanks to our sorrow, he says, that we were able to escape the war, escape the continual killing and fighting, the terrible conditions of battle, and the unhappiness of men in fierce and violent theatres of war. In my role as uncle, and cognizant of my emphasis in this talk of structure over agency in the making of gendered subjectivities, it would be remiss of me not to point out that Daniel has turned into a fine young man who appears to have evaded or remained largely unscarred by the patriarchal forces explored in this exhibition. This brings me to another absence in this narrative, a benevolent counterpoint to the destructive forces that permeate the themes underlying The Binding. That is the figure of the kind, nurturing father. Daniel has been supremely lucky on that score, which, to my mind, brings a note of optimism that cycles of bondage, violence, and sacrifice are not inevitable. Thank you.
is entitled A Prayer for Healing. As you notice, it's kind of difficult because it's a song in which you do less singing and more breathing. In a search for healing, the first step is to get some air and breathe. This next one was written purely for this exhibition and these times. Our father was dreaming, his son was burning. Our father was learning that in war, beloveds they burn, and they burn, and they burn, and they burn, and they burn. Our father was screaming, his son was burning, the bombs were dropping, 'cause in war, beloveds they burn, and they burn, and they burn, and they burn, and they burn. And they burn, and they burn, and they burn, and they burn. Father was dreaming, his son was burning. Our father was learning that in war, beloveds they burn, and they burn, and they burn, and they burn, and they burn. The father was screaming, the son was burning. The father was learning that in war, beloveds they burn, and they burn, and they burn, and they burn, and they burn. It knows no boundaries, even churches, presidents' offices are not immune to its sharp and destructive tentacles. This wave of war in these Renaissance times, fueled by hateful rhymes. And they burn, and they burn. It knows no boundaries, even churches, presidents' offices are not immune to its sharp and destructive tentacles. This wave of war in this Renaissance time, fueled by infectious rhymes. And they burn, and they burn, and and they burn, and they burn. Free Palestine, free the Congo, free Yemen, free Germany, free the United States of America, free Iran, free France, free the Sahel. 'Cause they burn, and they burn, and they burn, and they burn. Free Israel. Free Israel. From Netanyahu, free Israel. The father was screaming, his son was burning. The father was learning that in war, beloveds they burn, and they burn, and they burn, and they burn, and they burn. The father was dreaming, his son was burning. Bombs were dropping, 'cause in war, beloveds they burn, and they burn, and they burn, and they burn, and they burn. In closing, it's supposed to be a short thing. In closing, a prayer for peace, a prayer for love, a prayer for healing in these difficult times. When I started working, I used to work as a production assistant, which means you carry cameras, you clean cars, and I used to be the only black person who wasn't Zimbabwean in the production crew. Thus got to hang out with the majority of white males who end up being DOPs in this country. And there was a running joke while we were carrying gear up hills. It was back in Nam. And I was like, what? Y'all don't go Nam? They're like, no, man, Namibia. Today, the pertinence of those conversations came to mind, and I think the hurts of part of our society who at times are not given any time to deal and space to deal with that trauma of that state-inflicted violence, of being conscripted to go fight communists. War does something very blunt. It turns us all into instruments. It denies our humanity. It's important that we are careful of the coming wars. It's important that we find languages that do not split us into binaries very easily. Things are complex. Genocide is not up for argument. However, what this has shown is that as a global community, first and foremost, we don't know how to speak about things in our locality. not been able to organize together, even though we felt a particular way together about this war. COVID showed me this. It's the weirdest thing. I'm a BA student and they say these degrees of ours are useless. But when people didn't know where to get ambulances and all it would have taken was an infographic, the BAs mattered. There's something missing. We're still speaking an old languages that's going to push us towards very obvious holes in our history. We need new people. We need new hymns. We need new languages. We need new ways of speaking of our hurt, our trauma, and how we'll find a way to heal as a species together. We need to deal with our shame. We need to deal with our shame. To the misogynists in the room, we need to deal with our shame. It causes all of us pain. again. You've heard it before, come on. From your heart, from your belly, Neil. Let it out, let it out, let it out, let it out. Last chance to let it out. And now a big finish. Tell people I come from a country with no lead singers. Yeah? Sing when it's sore, when it doesn't make sense, when you need clarity. Sing. The singing thing is not meant just for people on stage. We need you to sing once a week in your life. Do yourself that favor and sing. It will save the world.